Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Kristen.
And my name is Katie. And we want to spend a few minutes a day with you walking through the New Testament, one chapter at a time. This year, we will fix our gaze upon Christ so that we may know him, not only with our minds, but with our hearts.
Together, we will learn that who Jesus is changes everything.
Hello! We are back for another day of A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Katie, and we will be walking with you through the book of Acts, an account of the early church. As always, we are tracking alongside the Behold studies from the Daily Grace Co. and the reading plan linked in the show notes. Today, we are studying Acts 14. Yesterday, we started reading about Saul, also known as Paul's, first missionary journey alongside Barnabas. We left off the duo being kicked out of Pisidian Antioch. They shook the dust off their feet and headed for a city called Iconium. That's where we find ourselves today. As I mentioned yesterday, it's helpful to have a visual map of the journeys to accompany you as you listen. You can even Google this. I think it's helpful to visualize where Paul and Barnabas are throughout this chapter. In chapter 14, we will read about the latter half of Paul's first missionary journey, where he and Barnabas will end at where they started, sharing their journey with the church from which they were commissioned, Antioch. Just a heads up, you will hear about two Antiochs in this chapter, Pisidian Antioch and Antioch in Syria. All right, let's get to the text. I love that Paul and Barnabas stick to their usual game plan in Iconium. We know this because Luke tells us that they preached in the synagogue as usual. As a result of their efforts, many Jews and Gentiles believed. But of course, according to a similar pattern we have observed on their missionary journey so far, many Jews were angered and jealous. They began to poison the minds of the Gentiles. Even in the face of opposition, this prompts the duo to stay even longer in Iconium, preaching boldly. Eventually, they heard the word of a plan to stone them, and so they left for Lystra and Derbe. Lystra and Derbe brought challenges of their own to the missionary duo. This was a more rural town, likely made up of pagan worshippers that had little knowledge of Judaism. They were likely only familiar with pagan worship of Roman gods. That is why, upon Paul and Barnabas' healing of the lame man in Lystra, people start to attribute Paul and Barnabas to the Roman gods Zeus and Hermes. The people begin to make sacrifices to them. For Paul and Barnabas, this is like a worse nightmare. They are healing not to bring glory to themselves, but to Christ. This is a vast misappropriation of glory. Paul and Barnabas tear their clothes, a Jewish symbol of mourning, and try to communicate that they are human and that glory belongs to the living God alone. They start at the beginning, communicating that God is creator of all things, the heavens, the earth, the seas. He is the one who gives them crops to eat from. They do not preach to those in Lystra the same way that they preach to those in larger cities. How different Jesus is from other religions. While Romans made room for religion after religion, Paul and Barnabas preached that there is only one living God. While kings of Rome demanded worship for themselves and likened themselves to gods, Paul and Barnabas preach, no, not us, God. They call away worship from many gods to the worship of the only God. Paul and Barnabas' efforts in Lystra only end in greater difficulty. Luke records that Jews from Antioch came to sway away the cities from Paul and Barnabas. Paul is stoned so badly that the crowds leave him for dead. This is the same type of punishment that killed Stephen. But miraculously, Paul survives. We do not read about a large number of believers turning to faith in Lystra, but we do know that fruit does grow here from Paul's efforts. In Acts 16, we learn that Paul picks up a future son-in-law in the faith, Timothy. He is from Lystra, an unlikely place to find a leader of the faith. Paul and Barnabas' efforts in Lystra were not without fruit. Thankfully, Luke tells us that many come to faith in Derbe. Before leaving for home, the group revisits the believers in that region, in Lystra, Iconium, and Pisidian Antioch, to strengthen and encourage believers to persevere through hardship. They appointed elders at these churches, prayed and fasted with them, and committed them to the Lord. How encouraging it is that Paul and Barnabas didn't just leave the region without establishing these churches in Galatia, without making sure that they were equipped to function on their own. Finally, Paul and Barnabas head back to Antioch in Syria, from where they were commissioned, to tell the local church of all that's happened for the sake of Christ. I love thinking about this church gathered and excited and inspired by all that Jesus was doing in the region as a result of their faithfulness to send Paul and Barnabas. What an encouragement. So how do we behold Jesus in this chapter? As we wrap up Paul's first missionary journey, we behold Jesus as the one worthy of all the glory. Paul and Barnabas set such a great example for us today. When others started giving them glory, they ripped their clothes and introduced them to the love of God and His graciousness to give us this world and even the food that we eat. May we do the same in our own lives. May we not take credit for a promotion, for a skill we have, for a new idea, or even a friend of ours coming to Christ. Let us give all the credit to Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Through Him, we have access to the best gift, fellowship with God. May we be quick to give Him glory in all things.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. Don't forget to check out the show notes for helpful links and resources related to today's episode. And make sure you are following at Daily Grace Podcast on Instagram for more A Year in the Bible content, and at the Daily Grace Co. for all things Bible study resources. We can't wait to study again with you tomorrow. Bye, friends.